always love to hear from you. Send us your views, comments, and videos with your name and town to the One Africa TV's WhatsApp on 081 200 6659 or send an SMS to 555. One Africa TV, it just gets better.
Bring the family together with great specials like Spa Wolf Dog Chunks for only $104.99 and Huggies Dry Comfort Nappies Jumbo Pack for just $155.99. We're here for you.
Over the past 2 weeks, and everybody's seen me have enjoyed it. You're going to enjoy today's poem, especially because it looks at a very specific genre, and that is the Gothic genre. Okay, and when I say genre, I mean style. All right, so a genre, and you can see the word down here. Genre is a style. Look at this castle shrouded in mist with these, looks like possibly bats or ravens, some big flying creatures circling the castle, and this very strange and ominous path that leads up to the castle. This should give you a kind of a sense of the atmosphere that Gothic writing tries to evoke, tries to create. Aliens. Oh, aliens. You're right. You know, although aliens do not really fall into the Gothic genre, they would fall more into the sci-fi genre. It is true that if you've watched any of the films Aliens, I don't know if you're allowed to, which age aimed at, but there's also a very eerie atmosphere that is created. And yeah, maybe I don't think these would be aliens here though, simply because with the Gothic genre, it's more about the supernatural than it is about possible extraterrestrial life. Okay, but good. Glad that we're thinking along those lines. But vampires, Batman, yes, they've all got that kind of element to it. Excellent, guys. Brilliant. Okay. So now, in your textbook, it explains something about the Gothic genre. So it says, read this text from a book about types or genres, styles of stories. The Gothic. And let me just make this a little bit bigger so you can follow more clearly. Thanks for those of you who have just joined. Nice to see you. The Gothic. Towards the end of the 18th century. So when we talk about 18th century, we're actually talking about the 1700s. I know it's a bit strange, but the 1700s in Britain and in Europe, writers started to tell stories, compose plays, and create poems that people called Gothic. The main characters were often young people, for example, girls or orphans, and this is because they are vulnerable. Okay, so it was usually about vulnerable people. The plots, the events that happened, were full of mystery and suspense. Often readers did not know what was going to happen to the hero or heroine until the very end of the tale. Up with it now? Some stories involved one character seeking revenge on another, or turning from being good to evil. They can no longer handle what is going on in their lives, and so ultimately they become evil. They often contained supernatural happenings, supernatural events, murders or disappearances. The settings were often scary, dark castles, crumbling ruins or mansions, found in mountainous landscapes or wild forests. And so there is this connection to nature. And thank you for letting me know that you're late. Welcome. Typical titles were The Mysteries of Udolpho, The Castle of Otranto, and famously Dracula. And if you have not read Dracula, I suggest you do that. It really is one of the most well-known Gothic texts out there. That and Frankenstein. All right, so have a read of that if you want to. And here is today's poem, and it was written by Raymond Wilson, who was born around about 1925. Okay. So he wrote this poem, which has Gothic elements in it, and I want you to keep this idea of the Gothic. For those of you who have just joined, we've been looking at this picture of this eerie castle and how this evokes ideas of the Gothic, the kind of characters and storylines or settings you might encounter in something that is Gothic. All right, so here is today's poem. And it's entitled, In a Far Land. Do any of you, just by looking at the title, what idea does this evoke for you? This idea of a far land. What does this idea evoke for you? Have you seen this before somewhere? Okay. Something unheard of? Yes, you're getting there. It's something unheard of. It's far away. Yes. But where does this come from? Far from South Africa. Most likely. Yes. Remember the Gothic writers were coming out of Britain and Europe at that point. Okay. So, just to save time, and I'm sorry to have to do this, think about fairy tales. Once upon a time in a land far, far away, there lived a princess in a castle, etc., etc. It comes from fairy tales. This is kind of something, an idea or a motif, a recurring idea, a motif from fairy tales. Right. So that's interesting because we also looked at some poetry from fairy tales last week, or the last 2 weeks. And it's carrying on in this Gothic genre. So they also made use of different kinds of genres themselves, the fairy tale genre. Okay. Now let's get into the poem itself. In a far land, a black mountain broods. Beneath the black mountain stretch the green woods. Among the green woods, a white castle soars. In the white castle are dark corridors. The corridors lead to a black shut door. Behind it, a prince sprawls dead on the floor, with a cobwebbed cup by his withered hand. A prince lies poisoned in that far land. A hobbling old princess creeps to that door. Ghost calling ghost forevermore. She murmurs her guilt in sighs and soft moans. Behind the locked door, the dead prince groans. Okay. So, did you note the Gothic imagery that is being evoked here? Send me some key words that you see as immediately conjuring up this idea of something Gothic. Yes, darkness. Okay, we have the black mountain, and this is repeated. All right, what else? Cobwebbed, yes. Okay, now, somebody said demonic, but I don't see the word demonic here. So I'm talking about actual words. We're looking at words specifically here, okay? So cobwebbed, yes, good. Dark prince. I don't see dark behind it, a prince. Okay, sorry, we only read it once, so maybe I should have read it once. Creeps, yes, good. We already have a suggestion of something supernatural, something maybe inhuman. Creeping, okay. Although people can creep as well. Ghost and dead and withered. Yes, ghost calling ghost. Excellent. Withered. Yes, this is lifeless. There's no life left in his head. Okay. Far land. Yes, this is a Gothic motif as well. In a far land. Something mysterious. Something we can't access. Okay, good. Dark corridors. Yes, good. Okay. Even this idea of a castle soaring. It's magnificent. It's imposing. We have to look up at it. Okay. And so all of just the word choice already shows you that this is the Gothic genre. So word choice or diction, that's another word for word choice, diction, relates to the Gothic genre. Good. All right, black shut doors. Yes, the shut doors as well. Black shut doors. Oh, brilliant. Okay, so now we know that we are in sort of we are dealing with a Gothic poem. Let's read it one more time just to get a greater sense of what's going on. In a far land. In a far land, a black mountain broods. Beneath the black mountain stretch the green woods. Among the green woods, a white castle soars. In the white castle are dark corridors. The corridors lead to a black shut door. Behind it, a prince sprawls dead on the floor. With a cobwebbed cup by his withered hand, a prince lies poisoned in that far land. A hobbling old princess creeps to that door, ghost calling ghost forevermore. She murmurs her guilt in sighs and soft moans. Behind the locked door, the dead prince groans. Okay, so what has happened here? What has gone on here? Now, I just want to give you a bit of background. I want you to think about that storyline, keep it in your minds, and now we're going to look at a bit of background here. The poem, In a Far Land, is a bit like a ballad. Who knows what a ballad is? What is a ballad? Yes, good. It's a type of song. Yes, it's a specific kind of song. A song that usually deals with... It's definitely got a song-like structure, so let's put that here. It's a song-like structure. A poem that tells a story. Yes, there's a story in ballads, in ballad poetry. Yes, good. Okay. All right, so we're having some nice suggestions here. A song-like structure. All right, so it's a song that deals with short stanzas. Yes, so there's a certain kind of rhythm to it, in other words. Yes, there's a song-like rhythm to it. And just as in songs, you get repetition. So you create the rhythm and you get repetition. So in a far black land, a black mountain broods. Beneath the black mountain stretch the green woods. Among the green woods, a white castle soars. In the white castle are dark corridors. You see that dum, da dum, da dum. I read that a bit fast, but I'm just trying to show you that rhythm that happens. And this is typical of ballads, where ideas are repeated, just like in songs you have choruses, verses, etc. So this is typical of more ancient poems are ballad-like, and they usually explore sad topics or melancholic topics. Melancholic. Okay, so that's what ballads do. And if you listen to modern-day ballads, an example of a modern day, probably not modern by your standards, but Aerosmith, for example, will have some ballads. And you could even argue that the song that Princess or Queen Anna or Queen Elsa, can't remember, sings to Frozen, the Frozen theme, is a bit of a ballad. It's about heartache and sadness, although that song actually does, have a happy ending near the end, or an uplifting idea near the end. So I see there's some very funny and nice suggestions coming through. The fact that somebody wants to go to the castle and do a 24-hour challenge, that would be pretty scary. And if you did that, I'm sorry, you'd have to come out with some Gothic poem, I would insist, or a ballad of some kind, okay? So, but pretty cool you'd want to do that. That's awesome. And then another suggestion that Aerosmith are an awesome band. They're really, really good. They are amazing. So if you want to hear what a modern day ballad sounds like, go listen to some Aerosmith, okay? All right, so great. Glad that you all have some good general knowledge about the world. What is going on in this poem? Well, keep that story in your mind whilst we look at what the textbook goes on to explore. So the poem in a far land is a bit like a ballad, a rhyming poem that tells a story, which was often spoken aloud before it was written down. So in the olden days, when people didn't just have access to paper and pens, etc., or quills even, and ink, they would have gone from sort of rich people's poems, telling them these oral stories, ballads. This was how people entertained themselves before Netflix. They would come and present story, and ballads would go on and on and on, just like the series that we sometimes watch goes on and on and on. And this is all about entertainment value, and this was especially treasured in winter months when it was dark and cold and the fire was on and everybody was sitting around huddling to keep warm. Ballads would be the best form of entertainment. All right. So number 6, the question here says, write down the pairs of rhymes from each verse. Do they match exactly? Because we're looking at this concept of a ballad, a rhyming poem. Let's look a bit more closely at those rhymes and how they are created. So let's look at the first stanza. In a far land, a black mountain broods. Beneath the black mountain stretch the green woods. Broods, woods. Do they sound the same to you? Broods, woods. Okay. Same or different? Good, not exactly the same. Yes, broods, woods. Okay, there's definitely a different sound going on there. So when there is a slight difference, we call that half rhyme. It almost rhymes. It's half rhyme. And sometimes there is a similarity. It's true. If you read it quickly enough, it kind of blends together. But if you read it slowly, if you read it with great attention, you'll see there's actually a bit of a difference. Broods, woods. Okay, great. All right, so there's a difference. And writers will sometimes do this to be clever, to play on words that look the same, but then unexpectedly give you a different sound. So your eye thinks it's going to be the same, but actually your ear can tell it's slightly different. And if we carry on down to the next one, so writers do that too, playful. It's quite playful. It's clever. But also sometimes you just want to find that right word, and maybe you can't find the right word, but you need it to fit in, so you'll choose a half rhyme instead of a full rhyme. So among the green woods, a white castle soars, soars and corridors. Soars, corridors. Same or different? Okay. Okay. Some saying same, some saying different. Okay, so remember we're focusing on the rhyme. Soars, corridors, oars. I know why you think it's different, because there are 3 syllables in corridor, and soar is just one, but the rhyme, the bit at the end that rhymes, is the same. Soars does rhyme fully with corridors. Okay, and then we have let's just rush through it a bit. Shut door and floor, that's the same. Hand and land, that's the same. Door evermore. Door evermore. And so perhaps, even though the rhyme is sounding the same, this evermore, if we break it down into its syllables, you could argue that there's a playful rhythm that is created by using these unexpectedly long words after a longer, elaborated, shorter word. So soars is quite a long word. It has a slow rhythm. Soars, corridors. Okay, so it's being quite clever in the way that it's playing with that rhythm. and it's unexpected. Maybe with sores, we would expect something like floors, you know, something also that is a single syllable word. But here, evermore also does the same thing. Door, evermore. Just breaking up that rhythm slightly, adding something to it. And which re-emphasizes that this is a ballad. And then we have moans and groans. So they are a full rhyme. So now that we've looked at the rhyme scheme, and they say, do they match exactly? We could argue that the broods and woods does not, and that therefore it's half rhyme, and that this is playful and clever. But you could also argue that perhaps this addition of syllables on corridors and saws, and on evermore with floors, I think it was, door, those are also playful, and sort of adds to that ballad-like nature of this poem. Okay. Number 7, learn one verse from the poem, then speak it aloud. How easy was it? Don't worry, I won't get you to do that. Why do you think ballads or story poems used rhymes? Well, because rhyme is one way of helping you to remember stories, isn't it? I'm glad everybody was getting confused with rhymes. It's not always that clear, hey, what it is. So don't worry. This takes work, all right? But yes, story poems. Why do they use rhymes? Why do we have get that on the wall? Have category? Well, decades later, I remember all my nursery rhymes. Hopefully, you do too. That is why they would have used rhymes. It's for memory, for the sake of memory, right? For memorization, and to pass these ancient stories on to the next generation. If they didn't have it in writing, it would just be passed on, and other people who were in your audience would learn it as well. And this is how stories would spread. And that's why rhyme is very important. It's a memory device. The poet also uses sounds in another way. Which 4 words from the final verse sound like the noise they are describing? All right, so let's just reread this question. The poet also uses sounds in another way. Which 4 words from the final verse sound like the noise they are describing? In other words, where else is there onomatopoeia? Onomatopoeia is when the sound of a word describes the action of the word. The sound of the word reflects the nature of the word. So, for example, here's some suggestions. So I think you have a good idea of what onomatopoeia is. So, she murmurs her guilt in sighs and soft moans. Behind the locked door, the dead prince groans. Excellent, groans, very good. Yes, that is one. What else? We have sigh. Can you hear it? Sigh. You almost hear the meaning of the words reflected in its sound. What else is? Oh, murmurs. Okay, so they said murmurs, murmur, 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 murmur. You can hear it, right? She's not shouting out her guilt. She's murmuring, I'm guilty. I'm murmur. Okay. Moans. Yes, good. Those are the 4. Murmurs, sighs, moans, groans. Okay, so this is sound at work. It plays on sound, and this also evokes a kind of feeling. Right, so we've identified the onomatopoeia, and we have identified that it's linked to sound. But what is the effect that this creates? And this is a very important part of analysis that a lot of students struggle with. Great, but so what? What does it do? Why do this? Scary. Okay, so yes, let's say it sounds scary, this moaning, this groaning, sighs and murmurs in this big dark castle. It's not something you want to be hearing, okay? So it could be scary. But why do we care that it could be scary? What is the poet trying to do? And it's not just about scaring us. That's an aspect of it. But what is the ultimate effect of being scared? Hard one. Okay. Because we're limited for time, and I'm sorry we're running out of time, I'm going to have to just impose my ideas to keep you away from the castle. Possibly, except this castle doesn't even exist, does it? Castle does not even exist. Well, not in this dimension. Okay, so it's actually to create an atmosphere. What kind of atmosphere? That Gothic atmosphere, which then causes us to feel fear, okay? Supposedly. It's something scary. So this is all linked to the idea of how does a poem create a certain Gothic atmosphere? And the poet will do this through using certain words to show, to emphasize the guilt of this princess, to emphasize the death, the horrible death the prince has suffered, and trying to leave us in suspense. Yes, good. It is leaving us in suspense. Why is that important? After reading this poem, this build-up of suspense, what do we think? What needs to happen next? We've read this poem, there's some suspense. Now what? It makes us want to, or it makes us think about. Okay, 2 minutes to go. I'm sorry I have to butt in here. So, it makes us want to find out what happened, right? This is a cliffhanger. They have ended the Netflix series on a cliffhanger. What happens next? What actually happened? What's been going on in this story? Why is there a hobbling old princess who's actually a ghost of a princess reliving something, creeping to the door? Why is she guilty? Why does she feel this guilt? Why is the prince groaning on the floor with a cobweb cut and is with a hand and he's been poisoned? Who poisoned him? Why? Well, look who's guilty. But what actually happened? What's been going on? We want to find out more about the story in the poem. The story poem, the ballad. And that's what I've been trying to get to. Everything that is put in a poem is there for a reason. It acts in a certain way to create images, to entice you in, to play with ideas, to question people's motives. All of these things happen in poems and in larger extracts that are not poems. In other words, prose. Anything that's not poetry is prose. And that is how you can transfer these analysis skills from poetry to something like prose. And I'm just going to finish off by reading this last quote here. By analyzing the shape, sound, and structure of the poem, you can see how the reader is led on a mysterious journey to find out what is behind the door, that door that's closed in the corridors. The poet has also used structure to surprise the reader and make them think.